prior to being at Queens, I served as a college advisor. So I worked with a nonprofit for 2 years. So I was working at a public high school here in North Carolina. My senior class that I worked with was about 400 students. So including the entire school, including the entire school, my caseload was about 1,200. So my whole job was to help build a college culture and to meet with these students, help them to complete their applications. And really, I feel like a lot of my goals were the same as my goals here as an admissions counselor. So to go a bit into the presentation, first, I think it's important to have the context of who we are here at Queens. And so if you're not familiar with Queens, we are a small private school so we are right in Charlotte, North Carolina. So Charlotte is the 15th largest city in the United States. And our total student body here at Queens is that is going to be roughly 2,400 students. That's including our undergraduate as well as our graduate students. So we have people from about 35 states as well as 23 countries. 10% of our students are international students. You are able to see 36% of our students, that 30% of our incoming students are, that 36% are also transfer students. So our average class size is 16. Student to faculty ratio is about 10 to 1. So we have folks who are from all over the world, but I think as a small institution, we are always trying to expand our reach, right? And I think a large way we do that is going to be through all the relationships that we have with high schools, and also through our relationships with with some independent counselors as well. So that's kind of why we chose this topic. We understand that counselors are so important, we know that counselors are so important to the way that we recruit our students, and if we're able to maintain a relationship with them, I think that helps everyone, right? They are trying to send their students to schools that will be a good match, and I think we are always trying to yield some students that are going to be strong fits for our school and for our colleges and our universities. So you guys know a little bit about us. We are interested in learning a bit more about all of you. And so Tracy, Tracy is going to launch a poll for us, and we have a few questions there. So pretty straightforward. We are interested in knowing, do you have a formal counselor communication plan? And so the options are, yes, you do have a formal plan, kind of meaning that you have an informal plan. So you maybe haven't planned out exactly when you're going to send something, but you send that out informally. No, you don't communicate with counselors at all, or you're in the process of creating this formal plan. And then who executes that plan? So does it come through the admissions office, through a marketing or communications office? I'm realizing I didn't put an option for no if you don't have a plan, but you can select other. Okay, thank you guys for responding so quickly. So it looks like we're seeing a lot of those answers roll in. So about a bit over 50% of people it seems like they have a bit more of an informal plan, and 40% do have a formal counselor communication plan. Great. And no one said no, that they don't communicate with counselors. That's wonderful. That's what we like to see, right? It is very important to have that bridge there. And then for who executes this plan, it looks like about like over 70% of people, it's sent by the admissions office. Very few have it happen through the marketing and communication office, and then 17% other. All right, thank you guys for sharing. Okay, just X out of that. All right, wonderful. So it seems like the majority of people do have some kind of an informal plan. And so that's 100% what we had here at Queens for a very long time. So when we think about when we think about the communication with, when we think about the communication with counselors, a lot of what we think about is very informal, right? So the types of information that we tend to send. I think that campus updates are a big one, right? We send a lot of updates that maybe say like, here's how we're handling the COVID-19 pandemic, or you might have opened a new sports complex on, or you might have a new major, right? Those are things that you want counselors to know. Any changes to your applications, dates, and deadlines. I know popular ones this year, a lot of people were emailing counselors to let them know that the school is going test optional. You also might say, we are pushing our deadline back to June 1st, things of that nature. I know the main way I communicated with counselors, and I think this was informed by my time as an advisor, is I would send a lot of updates on individual. So I would send a lot of very personalized updates. So I might email a counselor saying, hey, we maybe have 10 applications that are from your school. 5 of them were admitted, 2 of them have not turned in their application, things like that. Then there are the introductory emails also. There's a lot of turnover on both sides of the desk. So I feel like every single year, I probably am emailing counselors to reintroduce myself to them. I also will be changing my territory. So I'm going to be working with students in the Northeast in the fall. So I'll probably email all of those counselors, say, hey, here's who I am, right? We all know about the dreaded emails for trying to set up high school visits also. Thank goodness for what do they call it, SCORE and a lot of websites like that finally helping to limit those. But I think what's really important to note here is that a lot of this is pretty impromptu, right? So we typically send these emails as needed, and we send them as we think of them, right? So I think what was important for Queens is really making sure we shifted our mindset. I think our mindset was always focused more on what information do we want these counselors to know? And we also were doing it according to the timeline in admissions. But that's not how it should be, right? Just because I think that the calendars don't always line up. So it's important to keep in mind what information do the secondary counselors need, and also trying to keep in mind their timeline as well. And I know that, and so Lizzy will talk more about that kind of reframing later on as well. So that brings our main question. What do counselors want/need? So I'm in lots of counselor groups on Facebook. And so these are some posts that I've compiled and I've gotten some permission to use also. So take some time to look at this. Lots of the important parts are highlighted in yellow. So you can see no need to send the celebrating you emails. We are not unappreciative, but our inboxes are overwhelmed as is, right? So lots of us send happy Counselor Week, happy Black History Month, welcome back to the school year is wrapping up. They don't necessarily have time for all of that, right? So many of us get so many emails each and every day. Can we make a resolution for admissions offices not to send automatic email alerts to students that materials are that materials are missing while your offices are closed for the holiday. So this is about student comm, but if we think about it, lots of those high school students, if they're not able to reach us, they're freaking out, they're emailing their counselor. So trying to keep in mind what is most useful for them. Another one, just lots of those trigger emails that everyone gets every week or two on top of all the other emails that we get. So there were a lot of posts like this. And so again, kind of to summarize, they're receiving too much communication, and a lot of this will cause them stress, and a lot of it is not information that they're going to use. So I know myself, when I was working with my caseload of 1,200 students, I mean, lots of schools might email me. They might send me a brochure, but when I have a line of 20 kids out my door, I don't have time to read those things, right? So now Lizzy is going to go into what are some of the changes that we made, and what are some of the ways we really worked to make this communication as effective as possible.
Okay, there we go. Awesome. Okay, guys, I am going to hop right in and talk about some of the changes that we've implemented. And just a reminder, please utilize the Q&A box at the bottom. I'm going to run through a lot of stuff, and I don't want you guys to forget your questions, even though we'll do our best to leave time at the end. So again, thank you, Allie, for kind of summarizing all of those things that kind of got us to where we are in the discussion of, you know, what we wanted to change with our counselor communication plan. So what have we changed? Allie did a great job of talking about, there we go. Allie did a great job of talking about how we've kind of gathered intel, if you will, from various different kinds of sources and groups. You know, the Facebook group example that she shared are a good example of that. But I would also say that we went directly to the source. So we hosted a virtual counselor event last May, where it was just all for high school counselors. And yes, we, you know, kind of updated them on our pandemic plan, but we also took advantage of having all of them in the same place at once to really directly ask them, what type of communication do you all enjoy receiving, like to receive, and how do you like to receive it? So we went directly to the source. And then once we went directly to the source, sorry, I don't know why these are you still controlling it, Allie, or am I? It's lagging a little bit.
I see that you're controlling it, but I could maybe stop my share and then you can reshare if that might be helpful.
We'll keep going, but for whatever reason, it's just lagging a little bit. But to jump right back in, you know, once we kind of got a better idea of what information counselors kind of wanted to receive, we really challenged ourselves to think differently about the traditional way in which we've been always kind of treating and thinking about our counselors. And I think one thing that we tried to do differently this year is kind of think about them in the same way that we talk about, or we think about our student prospects, right? So they're kind of coming in at the funnel at different stages. They need different information throughout the funnel, how we're kind of expanding our, you know, prospects. We kind of thought through that mentality for our counselors as well. Okay, there we go. All right, so one of the first steps that I would say that we did very early on too, when we realized that we wanted to kind of revamp this plan, is that we actually restructured who was going to kind of be the point person to take on these roles and responsibilities for this new counselor communication plan. And pretty early on, we realized that my role kind of was the best fit for creating and kind of executing on our ideas. So that was something that we were able to kind of establish pretty early on. And then once we had that point person identified, Allie and I were able to meet together to really kind of formalize a counselor communication plan in both the format and the timeline that kind of met or aligned with our resources and what we wanted to kind of set out to accomplish. And then what that kind of looked like as far as changes for us was that we created additional information in a way that we thought would be more beneficial for the counselors that were receiving it. So what we kind of landed on was a monthly counselor email newsletter. So again, not kind of overwhelming counselors on a weekly basis or anything like that, but wanted to get them comfortable with just getting used to kind of seeing the same formatted email on a monthly basis. So they could choose to open it, read it, absorb the information we were sharing with them. And we basically sent that monthly email out, that monthly newsletter email out to all of our counselors in our CRM database. And it came from our Associate Vice President of Admissions, Evan Sprinkle. And it was kind of under the theme of views from the admissions desk, is kind of the concept we landed on. And that's also the title of his blog that we launched on our new counselor resource webpage that lives on our Greater University website. So the whole concept kind of around views from the admissions desk is that Evan would once a month kind of share topics of relevance or importance to high school counselors. And it was less kind of about Queens and more about providing resources that we thought would be helpful for counselors to have. So it varied in topics throughout the year. And then at the bottom of the email, we did have a little Queens section that just kind of gave quick updates about deadlines, visit opportunities, etc., and things like that. And then we committed very early on too to making sure that we were going to analyze those results correctly and really make sure that we could measure the successes and shortcomings of instituting a new kind of campaign or communication campaign. And we also decided that that would kind of live within my roles and responsibilities. And here's just a quick little snapshot of what our counselor newsletter looks like in email format on the left. And then again, the webpage that we launched in tandem with that, which hosts the greater blog, so views from the admissions desk, as well as Queen's Fast Facts, application information, and visit opportunities for counselors as well. So now the big burning question of a year later, how has it gone? And I'm happy to kind of dive into some really great findings that we've had and successes. I mentioned analyzing results and wanting to commit to that. So we also had to define how we were going to analyze those results. And I think one of the most clear-cut ways to do that is by email performance. I know the anticipation is killing. Okay. There we go. So email performance was one of the obvious things we wanted to measure. So you can see here kind of our average. We took the average of our open rate, click rate, and opt-out requests. On average, we had a 24.4% open rate from our counselor emails, our monthly counselor emails. We would consider anything above 20% a pretty optimal open rate. Click rate, 3.4% on average. We would consider anything above 2% pretty optimal, so that's great as well. And then we were also able to keep our opt-out requests under 1%, which again is kind of the threshold that we like to stick with. There we go. All right, so and then as far as expanding our national reach and brand recognition, this was also something that was really important to us and wanting to see how implementing something like this counselor communication plan could help us do that. And I would say one of the ways that we measured that was through kind of downloading our tracking reports and really seeing where our counselors who were engaging with our emails by opening and clicking and visiting our website, where they were coming from. And we were really pleased to see that a lot of our engagement with those emails was coming from counselors in kind of our non-traditional pipeline markets. So we had counselors from, New York, Texas, Florida, Virginia, California, all engaging with this content that we were sending them on a monthly basis. We also utilized UTM codes in our emails so that we could also kind of analyze the web analytics, so we could see who was going to our website and who was, how much time they were spending on the website, what other pages they were visiting, all of that kind of stuff. Sorry guys, I don't know why it's lagging so bad, but there we go. Okay, and then like I said, we really just set out to gather some insights because we've never launched a campaign before that wasn't centered all around the students. So this was all new to us, and I think we've gained some really cool insights. For example, one of our emails that we sent out, we included a link to the niche survey that came out earlier this year, and that had an incredibly high click-through rate. So that kind of let us draw to the conclusion that counselors appreciate relevant third-party resources, as long, again, the keyword is they're relevant. And then also, I would say another conclusion we've been able to draw is since every email kind of has a different topic, we have been able to see kind of what topics stick with counselors and which ones maybe don't perform as well. I think our highest performing one this year was our applying early in a year of unknown kind of concept. And that one did really, really well. And then as far as, shortcomings, I would say the one snag that we hit very early on is with our CRM. We use Slate. We recognize that it also treats high school counselors and students very differently. So when it came to actually download, looking at the results and stuff, it was, we had to do our homework a little bit and really figure out how to make sure that we were doing the most with our CRM. So for those who kind of have questions as far as, I really want to implement a counselor communication plan, or I want to strengthen it, I do want to spend a little bit of time of just kind of giving some tips and pointers on where to start. So first off, I would definitely say for us, it was really key early on deciding who was going to be the point person. So again, we're really fortunate at Queens. We have a really great working relationship with our marketing and admissions office. So we were able to pretty easily decide that it made the most sense for me to take this on, but it definitely doesn't have to be a marketing person. And from the poll, it seems like it's a lot of admissions people who are really running this communication. I would just say, make sure that whoever you're really assigning as your point person, I don't have to remind this group how busy admissions counselors are and how many different balls they're kind of throwing in the air at once. So just make sure that that person has the right time, resources, and support to really execute on the plan. Just gonna leave them all open. And then number 2, review your current counselor communication plans. So this was really big for us. Definitely sit down and look at what messages you're sending out, who is sending them out. Are there any repeat messages? Is there anything you could be doing to streamline and can make your communication more consistent? We kind of did I kind of did an audit of what the counselors were sending out versus, what kind of our mass messages looked like. And there were so many different crossed wires and things that kind of needed cleaned up. So that was really eye-opening for us. And I would definitely recommend that for anybody else. And then third, gather and organize your counselor contacts. So again, I talked a little bit about how we started thinking differently with our counselor contacts in the way of, kind of thinking about like student prospects. So think about if there's ways to expand your database of names of counselor contacts aside kind of just the traditional gathering contacts through travel season. And then also just make sure that there's consistency in which you're organizing your counselor contacts. Like I said, we use Slate. So we had counselors kind of putting in information in a bunch of different ways and had to get that consistent on the same page. But however you're organizing your counselor contacts, just make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. And then create a calendar. So kind of really put it all down as far as what information you're thinking about sending out, kind of in a broader scope, and then the timeline of that. So again, what information would you like to send and at what time? I think we brainstormed early on we had about anywhere from 8 to 10 topics that we knew we really wanted to dive into. And then really just put it all together. And like I said, make sure whoever you're putting in charge of this or partnering with hold you accountable. So decide who your point person is going to be on creating and executing this communication plan. Look at what you're sending and what's working with your current communication plan, what maybe you want to accomplish. Get organized with who you're going to send this information to, and then really just create the content, or map out at least the content that you want to send. So that is kind of our recommendations as far as where we would recommend anyone kind of starting. We'll definitely kind of, like I said, hopefully you guys have been utilizing the Q&A feature, but definitely kind of save a little bit of time to open it up to questions. But hopefully you guys find some of this information really, really exciting. I just think there's so much opportunity for admissions offices to just continue to enhance the critical partnership that we have with our high school counselors. So hopefully you guys got some useful information out of this, and we are definitely both willing to continue the conversation should you guys have questions.
Thanks, Lizzie. So we do already have some questions, which is great.
Right.
So I saw someone had a question earlier that was about analyzing that I think was for you, Lizzie. So I know that they asked what types of results did you analyze? And so I marked that as answered B, because you spoke a little bit about that. But if we didn't fully answer that question, please feel free to retype it. So this first one, Lizzie, I think that you could probably take. So they're asking for our newsletter as well as for the communication plan. Were there any changes for in-state versus out-of-state counselors?
That's a really great question. There actually weren't any differences. I think that's actually such a great point as far as things that we can continue to build upon. But I will say that we really wanted this kind of newsletter. Again, we didn't want it to be Queen specific. We wanted it to be a resource for counselors, and something that they could, read and it be a concept that really got them thinking or could ignite a really great conversation with a student. So we did kind of try to keep it broad in spectrum as far as being relevant information to anyone, both in state or out of state. I will say, I think when we did expand our counselor contacts a little bit, and we did have some new additions as far as out of state counselors. We did an introductory email. That would be the only thing I can think of that really we did differently, because there was less likelihood that they really knew as much about Queens maybe as a high school counselor right up the road from us.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something where when you're spearheading the plan at your institution, I think that's a great thing to speak about. I think one of our goals is really just making sure that counselors know who Queens is and making sure that we're all on the same page. And I know that we are always trying to get more counselors from out of state. So I think that our plan in general is a lot more broad, but if you're looking to get in touch with more people but if you maybe want to form deeper connections with folks who are right in your backyard, then I think that your plan might look a little bit different, right? So really good point. And then we have another question. Do admission counselors continue to send regular reports and the communications mentioned on Allie's slide in addition to these newsletters? So that's a really good question. That is something that we have still done, but we did it in a very intentional way, I think is the main difference, because I think that in the past, really everyone just kind of said things willy-nilly. And so I think the first most important part is that everything went through our point person, Lizzy, because I think if everyone is sending their own comm, and if there's not any, and if there aren't any conversations happening. And if there's not one person who's tracking it, it's very easy for us to spiral back into sending way too much. And so Lizzy, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the things that you looked at when we did send some of that more that I guess more like specific to counselors.
Yeah, I think it was more of we did have kind of this views from the admissions desk monthly newsletter as kind of like the ground, level, as far as like that would be the one consistent thing that counselors could kind of get used to seeing in their inbox. And again, they were formatted the same way every month. In the introductory email for that, we kind of laid out what it was going to look like, and I think that's helped with engagement. But we certainly haven't cut counselors off, by the knees as far as still being able to reach out to their contacts. I think we've just gotten more intentional about not bombarding them and being better as like a team, as far as if one of our admissions counselors is, getting regular questions from certain high school counselors, bringing that forward to the group. And if that's a similar kind of concern, then we're really able to say, okay, counselors, I think you need to send this one-off communication to make sure that we're, correcting X, Y, and Z. And we still sent, like, out to Allie's point, they still have sent, sorry, that's loud. They've still sent, so-and-so is missing this, but it's just not all the time. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a very good point, that I think, at least from our perspective, I think the communication plan is a way of making sure everyone is getting the information that they need. And then anything else that's personalized, I think we're able to put in our knowledge as counselors, right? So I think the same way that we work with students, we are able to work with counselors. There are some counselors who I know I am able to email them over and over and we'll never really get anything done. And so there are some counselors who like every fall that I know that I will call them, right? But there are some people who I know want a lot of those updates. So I think that as you begin to form those relationships, I think it's important to continue to lean into those. Good question. And then the last question I'm seeing here right now. So everyone keep on sending in questions if you're thinking of any, but what are some efficient ways that you found to identify the right counselor contacts?
Yeah. So I kind of talked about thinking of counselors as, a little bit more strategically, like how we think about our senior prospects. And one of the things I mentioned was finding creative ways to kind of expand your database. So it kind of goes beyond the traditional, just collecting information during travel season. There are different companies out there that can allow you to, buy counselor contact information on a trial basis. And really, I think kind of the key thing with who we partnered with for that is that you don't necessarily get that contact information permanently. You have to kind of prove that person, that contact has really engaged with kind of the information that you're sending. So that's also been why it's kind of critical for us to make sure we're effectively tracking these results and analyzing it, because we're just trying to build a stronger base of counselor contacts where we can share hopefully this helpful information and resources, and just continue to share our kind of national brand and brand recognition, across the country.
Okay. Do people have any other questions for us? We have about 10 minutes left.
Done.
Okay, here we go. Oh, it's for me. Fun. When you moved into your role as an admission counselor, what are some of the ways you realize people on the college side can be helpful to high school counselors that we may not realize? Yeah, that's a very good question. So I guess it depends a bit on the school, right? Just because for high school counselors, they're all very different and the resources we have are very different. I think part of why I send those part of why I send those updates as an admission counselor is because working at a high traffic school, a high volume school where I was working with 400 plus kids, I didn't always know when they even applied to a school, right? And a lot of times, sometimes they might send that application in, and I haven't read that application. So I think feedback is really huge, but I think that is a tricky thing because sometimes schools want that, sometimes they don't. So I think that's when it comes into just making sure that you leave that door open, because I would have loved to know if maybe lots of my students need help with their essays and things like that. So and that only comes with forming those relationships. But yeah, just um, updates on specific students was helpful to me. Um, and really just keeping us and keeping them in the loop in terms of trends that you're seeing in your applications. I think that's what Evan really tries to do in our weekly newsletter. Like, I know something that we were seeing a lot, especially this past year, is a lot of students were leaving their extracurriculars blank. And I mean, tons and tons of those students work, lots of them take care of families, and that's not something that counselors always know, that students leave that blank. And so I know Evan made sure to tell them, this is an area where we're seeing students are having a hard time, here are ways that you can help them. So really just plugging them into trends that you're seeing on your end would be my main takeaway.
And
That's
I
a
would
very
say
good
too,
question.
just from on the marketing side, Allie's experience on the other side of the table has been kind of invaluable as we've been building this out. And I would say she's definitely kind of been our consultant, because we asked her everything from what is the information when you were a counselor that you just ignored and deleted, and what are things that made you stop and actually read something. So all of this kind of came about from knowing that high school counselors are a critical group that we want to continue to build their relationships with, but also Allie's experience has just been so helpful. So I would say, if you are in a position at your university where you have that kind of invaluable experience, definitely kind of raise your hand and introduce this idea kind of concept if you haven't already. I think you'll be just like so pleasantly surprised at how great the working relationship can be when you have somebody who really knows the audience that you're targeting.
Okay, and we have a follow-up question. So we actually did not mention this, so I'm glad that you asked. Does our communication plan include CBOs? Um,
It
Lizzy,
does
I'm
actually.
actually not sure if you want.
Yeah, it does actually. So again, when I kind of talked about the snags, as far as this being our first year of doing a communication plan that wasn't, student based, I mentioned that we use our CRM as Slate, and organization contacts are very different than student records and person records. So that was kind of one of the snags I was talking about, and I think like the mailing aspect of that is part of that. So we have our organizational contacts are strictly kind of the high school counselors because they're tied to an organization in Slate. But we haven't really figured out the best way to add CBOs and independent counselors as well. Although that's something we're working on right now, actually. So in the past, we've actually just kind of had to add an Excel mail list to get them included, but they're still receiving it. But as far as me just wanting to have everything in kind of one place so that we can really analyze things better, that's kind of been one of the snags. But we definitely have been very intentional about making sure that we're including our CBO contacts in this outreach.
And I think that kind of links into this next question, that are what types of things can we offer to help counselors? So whether that's being a panelist, if you want to do some type of a workshop, or and I think we do a lot of this work, especially with CBOs, because I think they tend to focus on this more than a lot of the high schools do. So we do offer these at some schools. And again, it really, and I know that this is a hard answer, but it depends really. So honestly, I think that one of the first great steps that you can do is maybe send out some type of a survey. So I think that Lizzie had mentioned earlier. So we had a virtual counselor session last summer, right before we spearheaded all of this, and basically asked them, what type of information do you want? Like how, so I think that you could send out some survey that maybe asks what information is good for you, what types of services can we provide that would be helpful, at what like frequency would you like to receive, and so I think it depends on your population, and so just letting them know that that channel is open to, for I think them knowing that they can come to you and ask those questions is huge, right?
And some of that, and I would say if you're kind of looking for a tangible example of that in action this year, we did get feedback from counselors that a virtual financial aid kind of overview session, both for them to be able to sit in on, as well as students and their families. And then we were able to launch that. And that was actually one of the kind of what's going on at Queens things that we sent out in our monthly newsletter for that month. And then we saw a really big uptake in registration from the counselor side for that event right after the email went out. So I think that's another just great example of how this newsletter has provided information that's both just helpful for them, but also does keep them in the loop, just probably in a less annoying way than maybe how we used to do it.
So I'm seeing the questions start to fizzle out, but Lizzie and I have our contact info up. Please just any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know that Lizzie and I are kind of nerds and love to go into the nitty gritty. And so if you have some really specific questions, please do not hesitate. We're always happy to answer those.
Yes, thank you everybody for your participation and attention and bearing with my very slow click reveals. And just best of luck. I hope this is helpful.
Thank you, ladies. Very nice webinar.
Thank you.
Just so you know, Allie and Lizzie, I saw your numbers go up to about 44. So
Oh, perfect. That's
good
exciting.
attendance. You bet. Well, I can end the meeting for you on this end, and you guys have a lovely day.
Thank you for everything, Tracy.
You're welcome.